Agile and let's say Scrum as a toolbox, and inside the toolbox we have practices such as daily stand-up, and that would be a tool. I mean, just this thing, right? Magical device that lets you talk to anyone in the world, and at a blink of an eye, it's crazy, it's magic, it's science fiction, but we're all used to it now, right?
Agile, if you look at it as a set of tools, can be helpful.
Yeah.
And as a mindset, I think it was never gone.
You need to start using the technology to start understanding what it can do. But then don't stop there, right? So the only chance to combat a bad AI is to make a good AI. So then all we can do is sit and eat popcorn and hope for the best.
And as a tool collector, you have to stay curious. And I think that curiosity also in some organizations and in some people, it got lost.
What I think of as doing or being agile is working in teams and delivering a product incrementally with a ton of user feedback. That's basically it.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Agile Insights Conversations. Today we're hosting Henrik Kniberg, whom I got to meet exactly more or less 10 years ago in 2014. It's 10 years, Henrik. It's
Wow.
10 years. And back then I joined your CSM. You allowed me to co-train on the very first one. That same evening, we had dinner at your place, cooked together, ate together. And if you do, I think you might remember, there was also the founder of the very first smartwatch.
What?
I forgot his name. Pebble, I think. That guy was also there.
Oh, wow.
And we had some really, really interesting conversations. He had back then, I think, the biggest Kickstarter campaign to date with his smartwatch, and he wanted to get some insights from you on how to set up the organization to maintain the level of agility that they had obviously displayed as a startup. I don't know where Pebble is today, but I fondly remember those conversations. So thanks for joining us today, and thanks for hosting me 10 years ago.
Yeah, time flies. So yeah, I guess it's your turn now.
Yeah, time absolutely flies. Now, Henrik, as most people associate you with the topic of Agile, given the videos that you have created, the amazing talks that you've given, the trainings that you have provided, the books that you've written, all of that, I want to start with that. But I also want to set expectations for everyone who listens to this podcast later. This is not going to be a podcast about Agile. We briefly will get your perspective. And the reason is the past 2 years, your passion has been somewhere else.
That's
It's
true.
been in the
right.
space of AI. And I mean, before that, you also had some work that you did around sustainability and all of that. Amazing video again.
Yeah.
But I want to focus the vast majority of today's conversation on the topic of AI. But we'll get started with Agile, as that might be the burning question that many people have.
Oh yeah, and I had 4 years obsessing over Minecraft. Those have been
That's right. I forgot that one. Now, when we talk about Agile, Henrik, there's a lot of this like Agile is dead stuff, right? If you, depending on the social media bubble that you're in,
Yeah.
you probably see that more, sometimes less often. But a lot of people say that, we've hit the laggards more or less, or most organizations are moving on to something completely different. How do you look at that? And maybe we can start with, what is your definition of what Agile actually is?
That's the burning question, right? I think that's a good place to start. Yeah, I've been hearing Agile is dead for 10 years. And I read a very interesting paper that claimed that that Agile, the thing that Agile kind of means, has been around for half a century, but it gets kind of relabeled every 10 years to something new. So it's a fashion industry, I think, to some extent. But yeah, what do I think of as Agile? It has nothing to do with the word, really. What I think of as doing or being Agile is working in teams and delivering a product incrementally with a ton of user feedback. That's basically it.
Yeah, that's basically it. And it connects to how I define Agile for myself is embracing that there is uncertainty.
Yeah.
And then having a systematic approach to systematically and frequently reduce that uncertainty.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what you do in teams. And given that uncertainty is rather increasing than decreasing, my assumption is Agile won't be there for a long time.
I think the word Agile is probably taking a very long time to die, but probably is kind of dying as a hot buzzword. But the thing that you do, it's just normal day-to-day work. when I work, every team I've worked in, we do something similar to sprints, short increments. daily stand-ups, take the big thing we're going to build, do it in smaller steps, and have a ton of user feedback. And that's not going anywhere, I think.
Absolutely. And I think more and more, especially companies that at some point forgot how to do that. Because what I also see, every big company used to be a small company at some point. And when they were a small company, they used to do this very intuitively, especially when they were founder driven. And over time, with the increase in bureaucracy, they forgot how to do this, which is when they lost their ability to innovate.
Yeah.
And now they need to bring in that ability to innovate again, where Agile, if you look at it as a set of tools, can be helpful.
Yeah.
And as a mindset, I think it was never gone.
Yes, for a long time, I've been trying to disassociate, like not focus on the word so much. So, is it a scrum master, or is it a project manager, or is it a team lead? It doesn't matter. It's nice to have somebody who focuses on driving improvement, right? Or is it a product owner, or a product manager, or product lead? No, I don't really care, but it's nice to have somebody who can focus on the vision and the priorities. So it's kind of like go beyond the words and look at what are we actually doing.
What do we actually need? What kind of accountabilities do we need to have?
And that's a way to kind of sidestep the more kind of religious aspect of some of these things.
Yeah. Now, another thing that always stuck with me in the interactions with you was, I think at some point you referred to yourself as a tool collector.
Yes, that I definitely am still.
Yeah. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
I use tool in a very broad sense, but what I like about the metaphor for tool is there's no tool that solves everything. And there's no tool that's only good. You can use a hammer to drive a nail in, but you can also hit yourself on the thumb by mistake or kill someone with it. You can use a hammer to brush your teeth, but it's not a very good idea to use it that way. So it's a good metaphor, right? So there's an intended use. And as you get proficient at a tool, you can use it in different ways. But the key thing is to understand what the tool is for and how to use it effectively. I think that's a great metaphor. So if I map that to things like Agile, I think of Agile and let's say Scrum as a toolbox, and inside the toolbox we have practices such as daily stand-up, and that would be a tool. And I think it's useful because then I think of it as I have this truck full of toolboxes, and when I'm with a client or with one of my startups, and I'm trying to figure out like, okay, let's pick up a new box here and take a few of those tools. Maybe I'll take that whole toolbox, but take out a tool, and then we'll get to work. And then over time, we'll notice that, I think I need a hammer. Go get a hammer. Or I think I need to adapt this screwdriver a little bit. So the tool approach I like it because it kind of gets away from the more dogmatic approach that sometimes we can fall into.
Yeah. So that's exactly where I wanted to go with a more dogmatic approach, right? If you look at some people in that space, they're like, using your metaphor of the hammer, they're like people who pray to the hammer. and believe that all other tools, right? Monotheists, right? There's one tool that will solve everything, and all the other tools they must be wrong,
otherwise
right?
You're being unfaithful, and you have to use the hammer in a specific way too. Otherwise, you're not following the rules.
Exactly, right. But if you consider yourself a tool collector, you immediately broaden your own scope, your own perspective. And you increase the chance for yourself to not fall into that ideology or dogma. And then you can also, as a consultant or coach, be way more supportive to your clients, or as an entrepreneur, way more supportive to your teams and to your organization.
And there's also a deeper, like all metaphors have limits, right? But I think that the tool metaphor goes quite far because let's say I'm used to using a saw to saw down trees. And then now there's a new tool called a chainsaw. And I'm going to get less productive initially because I got to learn to use this thing. And there's going to be some resistance to change. So I'm used to using a saw or an axe. And then now I have this chainsaw, which is different. I might be like, this is stupid. I need to pour in gasoline into it. And it's noisy and it's uncomfortable. But then once you learn to use it, you're 10 times more productive. So I think that's part of it as well. The kind of accepting that when you learn new tools, that may sometimes feel a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, and as a tool collector, you have to stay curious.
Yeah.
And I think that curiosity also in some organizations and in some people, it got lost. But when you look at kids, for example, and you have a bunch of them, and I do have a bunch of them, right? They are incredibly curious. So one of the things that I believe is important as a father, as an entrepreneur, as a coach, is how do we bring back and how do we maintain curiosity?
Yeah.
Right? Now, what do you do in that space? as a father, as an entrepreneur, as a coach?
I don't know. Maybe there's some aspect of personality, but I've always been curious. So I don't need to do anything to stay curious. I just naturally am curious. I sometimes have to try to tune it down a little bit, even to like, you know what? I'm just going to get this job done now. I don't have to try some new way of doing it. Like, so I think people have a natural inclination to be more or less curious, but of course you can try to counter that. So if you naturally aren't curious, or maybe are a little bit afraid, maybe you need to coach yourself to kind of to get out of your comfort zone a little bit. But for me, it's never really been a problem because I just am curious, and I think I'll just stay that way forever, probably.
Yeah, with you, I don't think there's a risk of losing curiosity. But when you, for example, think about clients that you worked with that had lost to some extent the ability or their level of curiosity, are there any specific things that you did in order to bring that back? And
yeah, there are some tricks, I guess, I found. When you show someone a very inspiring example, or at least can convince them to try something new, which they may be skeptical, but just try it, then that can spark curiosity that wasn't even there before. So that's like if I show a case study or an example or a powerful metaphor, then that sometimes makes people curious.
Yeah. Or your small examples or exercises that you also do when you give a keynote.
Yeah.
Right? When people have those Lego bricks or the balls or whatever, right? Within 5 minutes, they realize, oh, I thought that would go differently.
Yeah.
And that sparks their level of
like
curiosity.
Now I do these, I do a lot of AI talks and I do mostly live demos of various sorts. And, you know, when you show someone like, hey, let's build something in 3 minutes that previously would have taken a day, and you do it live on stage, then that makes people like, what just happened, right? And that triggers curiosity, and then from there you can make change happen. Like,
yeah. Now let's use this as a segue, because you are a person who constantly follows his curiosity. So at some point you started with Scrum and Agile and all of that. We talked about that. Let's put that aside. And now 2 years ago, more or less, and maybe it's 3 years, you correct me on that, your curiosity took you on the path of understanding AI and building products in that space and all of that. What was the point where that curiosity, that spark, initially started for AI, and how has your journey been so far?
So I've always been kind of interested in AI. Even when I studied AI. I took some course in neural networks at the Royal Institute of Technology here in Stockholm in the mid '90s. And was like fascinated by the concept of creating like artificial neurons and connecting them together and having them do something that looked kind of like learning. It was very primitive what I was doing in that course, but there was something interesting about it. And so I've always kind of been following this, but not really working with it myself until until I was doing Minecraft development. Then I was doing a lot of AI programming, building behaviors and different creatures. Now in games, AI is not real AI; it's kind of fake AI. You create rules and code, but it creates this illusion of autonomous agents in the game wanting to do something, and that kind of even more kind of made me realize that this is interesting, right? Having this concept of creating intelligence, and then ChatGPT showed up, and everyone was talking about ChatGPT 3.5, the first I think widely available version a couple of years ago. And I tried that, and I was really surprised. I was like, I never thought in my lifetime it would be possible to communicate with a machine like you communicate to humans. So that was really surprising. But of course, it was mostly a toy. I couldn't find very many really useful use cases other than like summarizing a short document or helping me come up with a rhyme or a song lyrics or something. So very, very impressive, but not super useful in practice. But the nerd side of me was very interested, but it was still just a background thing for me. But then GPT-4 came along, and I started seeing the benchmarks for that. I was like, what? It's surpassing human capability on a number of things that I never thought I would be able to do that. It seemed to be a step change. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. I need to take some time and look at this. So I took a week off, essentially, from other stuff I was doing. It just went out to my cabin alone, kind of turned off the phone and just like, okay, GPT, it's you and me. kind of and just started tinkering, using it for all kinds of stuff. Started coding with it, used it to help review an article I was writing, and just kind of overused it for a week. And over that week, I just got completely blown away. And I pretty much decided then and there that this is going to be my career now going forward for I don't know how long, but at least for the time being. because I just saw the incredible potential of how this could be useful, plus the fact that the technology seems to be improving so fast. So yeah, that was basically that's when it started for me. What about you?
Yeah, it's interesting. We talked about curiosity earlier, and you mentioned people need to see like something that couldn't be done before, and then so you went through that same thing. You're like,
Yes.
what can this thing do, right? And
Yeah.
in that 1 week overusing it. So for me, it was fairly similar. Obviously, I didn't go as deep as you have done in the space of AI. My focus is primarily elsewhere, but I saw that very early version of ChatGPT, and I was like, man, this is good. And you know what it reminded me of? So after med school, I joined Bain and Company as a management consultant. And obviously I was the most junior person on the team, and all the shitty work was given to me,
Yep,
right?
of course.
And when I started working with ChatGPT, I was like, hey, that's my Sohrab from 15 years ago.
You got your own sidekick now, like.
Absolutely. I suddenly had this sidekick, which could help me, right? With like, oh, do a bit of research here and please summarize this. And
Right.
you mentioned like rhymes. Oh, I have a model where there are 4 concepts. 3 of them already start with C. I need a 4th one.
Yeah.
Currently, can you come up with a word? Right? And for all of that kind of stuff, which usually, or some analysis, all of that kind of work that you would usually give to a more junior person,
Yeah.
if you have those people. Now, in my current organization, I don't have the luxury of having like a Sohrab from 15 years ago, but I suddenly had AI. And the costs of that were either free, or even if you went for ChatGPT 4.0, it was the premium version, it was negligible.
Yeah,
right?
it really
20
is.
euros, 25 euros, whatever it is a month.
Yeah.
You're like, what? I don't even care about this.
I mean, it's like
And that was the
what do you
point
pay
where I'm like,
for coffee or for Netflix? Like yeah, what are you getting? Like.
exactly. I was like, oh man, this could be big. So I started thinking about like all sorts of things that one could do. And then I followed some of the things that you were putting out there. And I was like, okay, Henrik knows a thing or two about this now. So let's get in touch with him.
Yep.
And then last year, more or less around this time, we had that 1-day workshop with my team.
Yeah.
Because I had decided, even before that workshop, we are a professional services company. We have a mission. We want to help society in general advance, becoming more productive, more humane, more sustainable, all of those things. And so far, we had done this through professional services of individuals. And what I was always lacking was scalability. I don't want to be the next Accenture. I don't want that, right? But I wanted scalability. So one area that we invested in was e-learning. E-learning is infinitely scalable. And then I thought, okay, what else can we do? And then this AI thing came around. I was like, man, what if everybody had a really good agile coach, which is our area of work, right?
Yeah.
In their pocket. And the analogy that I had in my head, and I reached out to you back then, I was like, what if everybody had a Henrik in their pocket, right? So there was that moment. And then after the workshop we had together, I was like, yes, I need to double down on this. We need to become an AI company, which does not mean that we create our own LLM. The level of investment needed for that is just absolutely insane.
Yep.
But that we leverage the technology that is out there and create value-adding services or products for our customers in order to get the job to be done on a global scale in a scalable manner, right?
Yeah.
So that was my journey into AI.
I'm grateful for that workshop, because I think you were my first actual customer for that type of workshop. Because I was just getting to the point where I don't want this to just be my hobby anymore. I want to live off of this. This is incredibly powerful. I should start selling this. I can live off of this. And you were one of the early customers. So yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, sure. Now, Henrik, you have been working at this now for 2 years. Let's say for a year now, you've also been thinking a lot about products, right?
Yes.
And one of the things that I remember hearing from you is you create something like a digital twin or AI twin or something like that, where maybe you can elaborate on this better yourself, like where some of the mundane pieces of a person's work are then taken over by AI that is trained on the work.
Yeah, kind of. I guess I noticed early that this technology is potentially extremely useful, but also there are some limitations that really made it not as useful as it could be. For example, if you use ChatGPT right now, and you ask it what time it is, it doesn't know. If you ask it to check your email, it can't. If you ask it to remind you something in an hour, it can't. If you ask what weather is it right now somewhere, maybe it can surf it up. But generally speaking, it is the equivalent of, if you think of it as an employee, as a colleague, it's like having an amazingly smart colleague that just sits at his desk sleeping all day until you go and prompt him. And then he wakes up and gives you brilliant answers and then goes back to sleep again. So you can't give him any mission, you can't give him any responsibilities, and he doesn't know what time it is right now even, right? So it's like, it's really interesting how extremely smart and also extremely stupid it can be. So, and I noticed that if you just with some code add a pretty thin layer of like access to tools, right? And it's possible to do this with GPT, of course, but we wanted to make it easy to create an agent, a digital colleague, and say, I want you to be able to access my Gmail. So here, and you give it an OAuth kind of connection to Gmail. I also want you to be able to do research online for stuff, and you enable that capability. And I want you to be able to communicate in my Slack, and you give it that. So you just give it capabilities, just like you would with an employee, right? You give them access to the systems they need. And then you can give this agent a job. You can say that I want you every day to check my email and post a Slack message with anything that is extra urgent. And if some customer contacts me, please do research about that customer. And if it seems like an extra big customer, also post it on this channel. This is just a hypothetical example, but these are the kinds of things that normally are hard to do. And we've now built a platform that is, making this easy to do, and working with clients to do this. So that I think that's super fun, because it's really similar to what you've been doing with the Agile Coach thing, is taking an amazingly good platform and adding that little bit extra to really turbocharge the usefulness of it.
Yeah. No, this is super interesting. And what that reminds me of is going back to the tool conversation. You're basically giving the AI access to tools.
Exactly. That's it.
Right?
Back to tools.
You're making the AI become a tool collector.
Yep.
And based on the tools that it collects or is given access to or is trained on, whatever, that super smart colleague suddenly can do stuff that a regular ChatGPT cannot do.
And also giving it a mission.
Yes, direction.
Which is so just, I think that's maybe where the connection to Agile comes in, but I've always kind of been surprised by how effective a team could get when they have the right tools and some autonomy and a clear mission. Then great stuff happens. And this is kind of what I'm seeing also with these AI agents. It's really inspiring.
Yeah. It's really inspiring. Now, looking at the product that we then decided to co-develop, I mean, we named it after you.
I'm honored.
Yeah. Initially, you were like, "Oh, Sohrab, I'm not really sure," and then like, "No, I want to name it after you because you've had so much influence on my journey." And for me, the working name of that product was always like Henrik in your pocket, and I could not go with any other name. But what I found out fairly quickly, also like overusing probably ChatGPT for our use, I'm like, it doesn't always have the right context, because it looks at all of the internet. And I mean, we all know, especially knowing our field of work, that there's a bunch of wrong stuff out there, and the AI cannot really distinguish. So I thought curation is needed in terms of what kind of sources is the AI trained on, does it use in order to provide an answer. Another thing that I believed was interesting, especially for our context, is an AI gives you an immediate answer.
Yep.
A good Agile coach doesn't.
Exactly.
Right? They help you to reflect.
Yeah.
Now, if someone is good at prompting themselves, they can. This is the thin layer that you mentioned.
Yeah.
They can prompt ChatGPT or any Claude, whatever, in a way that it uses the Socratic approach or whatever type of coaching approach you want to help the person dive deeper, learn, reflect more, provide more context before it takes you to an answer.
It's like the models, the large language models are perfectly able to do that. They just don't do it by default. So all you have to do is unlock that, right?
Exactly. Right? Give it that direction to some extent also. But where it's not I just give you an answer, it's I help you also become better at problem solving. Yeah. And then the third element that I always found interesting is sometimes the AI just doesn't know. And helping the AI admit, I don't know, right? Instead of, and I mean, people refer to it as hallucinating. I refer to it as just bullshitting, right? Yeah. Instead of bullshitting, saying, I don't know, or where people say, oh, I don't like that answer, it doesn't go deep enough,
Yeah.
where they can make that connection to an actual human. Because one of those key insights I had from the workshop we had with you was human plus AI, that
Yes.
equals magic. Not AI itself, or human plus AI, that equals magic. And having the ability to say, I reflected on those questions, I provided more context, we came to an answer collectively,
Yeah.
but also, I don't know whether that solves my issue. I would love to get a human's perspective on that and submit that via feedback, so that then you and I can give an actual feedback to people. That I think is really, really cool. And that's why we
Yeah.
built the product around these three core beliefs or elements.
There's something you mentioned there about that it's trained on the internet, and there's a lot of good and bad stuff out there. I like to think in terms of biases, that the models are biased, and they are capable of being biased in almost any direction. But a very concrete example of that, you can use that as a tool. So let's say I ask it to create, like let's say I'm discussing some kind of product idea with, say, ChatGPT or some model, right? And then I ask it, could you write down a specification for this, right? Then it might produce something that looks like a waterfall style specification. But if I say you are an Agile expert, I just add that little bit in the beginning, and then say, can I write a specification for this? Now I'm going to get a really nice product backlog with user stories and pretty well split. Maybe not perfect. I'll have to give some feedback, but just that one difference, I'm basically deliberately saying, I want you to be biased towards Agile and against waterfall. I'm asking it to do that because the AI models are experts in Agile, but they're also experts in waterfall. So kind of like steering the bias in the direction, like from a selfish perspective, I wanted to share my bias in that particular case.
Exactly. I mean, this is one of the other insights that I had at your workshop, is that prompting is basically everything.
Yes.
In that space, right?
It makes such a huge difference.
Yeah. Now, you gave one example of a prompt where you pretend you're an Agile expert. What are other elements where you say, okay, if someone follows like these 3 or 5 or whatever 10 rules in terms of prompting, they would be able to use or leverage AI so much better?
Yeah, it's interesting, the whole prompt engineering. I realized that there's 2 parts to it. We could call it low level and high level prompt engineering. Mm-hmm. Low level prompt engineering is basically tricks, like specific phrases, such as think step by step, or take a deep breath. There's all these little tricks that used to make a big difference, but don't make a big difference anymore, because they're basically built into the model. So if you take any kind of premium LLM, then it's going to think step by step anyway. If you ask it some question, it's gonna show how it's thinking. Then it's gonna answer, which is great. But a year ago, you'd have to write that. If you didn't think step by step, it would immediately throw an answer at you, and probably not a very good answer. So the trend I'm noticing is that low-level prompt engineering techniques are becoming less and less important. Except, I guess, if you're in a situation where you deliberately want to use a cheaper model and make it act like a more expensive model, then those tricks are helpful. But higher-level prompting techniques, though, I think are always going to stay relevant. And what's included there is things that may sound kind of obvious, but explain what you want. Like, what do you want to get out of this? Let's say I'm planning a wedding, and just if I just say make a plan for a wedding, I'm not giving it enough context to really think about, if I was talking to a human expert, what would they want from me? And there's basically 2 approaches there. Either you think about that and just provide that context. So I'm planning a wedding. We are in Sweden. We're this many people. And I want the wedding to be not so religious, and kind of a little more laid back, right? Just that little bit of context will do wonders. And the other approach is to just flip the script and just say, I'm planning a wedding, please interview me about it, and then suggest something. That's really powerful, that tiny little difference, because that, like you said, it's trained to automatically just blurt out answers. Mm-hmm. But if I say, please interview me first, then I'm deliberately asking it to not blurt out an answer. And then that one sentence could actually make a huge difference. So those, I guess, some examples. But maybe the most important thing is to iterate, because a lot of people who aren't used to this, they think of it kind of like a Google search query or something. And you just write something and you get a result, and you either like it or not. But often you get a better result by just giving feedback. So let's say I ask it to suggest an agenda for some kind of workshop, and it produces this very long, detailed agenda that wasn't what I wanted. Well, a lot of people would stop there and say, yeah, ChatGPT sucks or whatever. But don't stop, right? Think about, like, you need this kind of metacognition, this background voice in your head thinking about what you're thinking about. And that voice is saying, this is not what I wanted. What was it I wanted? And then you give feedback. And then you can get like 10 times better result within a minute by just being a little bit deliberate about what am I actually after, and then giving that feedback. Yeah. Really powerful.
And I think, I mean, this is exactly the analogy that I had, right? That Sohrab from 15 years ago that would create some stuff, a model or a presentation. Obviously, my manager would give me feedback on that because it was never right the first time.
Yeah.
Right? How could it be? Because similar to ChatGPT, right? I only received a bit of context, and I was, right, you go run with it, and then you create something, and then you get feedback, and then you adapt it. And I think if you approach an LLM in the same way, it really can work wonders.
Yeah. Another thing I think I just realized recently is that it's useful to really think about what does the model already know. And you can kind of deduce that a little bit. If you just imagine this thing has read everything on the internet, just use that as your mental model, right? So it's read all the Reddit threads, all Stack Overflow, all the articles, all newspapers. It's not strictly true, but it's a useful enough approximation, right? So, and then think about, okay, so what does it know? And what does it not know? And use that as a basis for your prompts. Let's say you work at a bank and you have asked some question about some feature you're building. Well, it knows everything about banks and the banking industry and banking products. It knows more than probably anyone in your company, but it doesn't know about your bank, and it doesn't know about your project and what problem are you trying to solve and what are you dealing with right now. So I'd use that as a kind of like, okay, so I don't need to tell it about a bank's work. It knows that better than me, but I need to add the part that it doesn't know. So I'm often thinking about that. What's the part that it doesn't know, and then kind of add that. Even things like it doesn't know recent events. So if there's any part of this that is related to recent events, I need to look that up and give it to it, or ask it to surf for it. But yeah, always paying attention to what does it know and what does it not know is really useful.
Yeah, I think what does it know is the assumption it knows everything that's on the internet.
Kind of, yeah.
What does it not know? Exactly. But what does it not know is exactly the context that I'm working in. Especially, it doesn't, for example, know what are the values that drive our project or our product and development and all of that kind of stuff.
And maybe it doesn't know what my current understanding is. So if am I a beginner in this topic or am I an expert, just tell it, and then it'll give you a much better answer.
Yeah. Now, Henrik, with all the work that you've been doing for yourself and for probably a bunch of clients out there, what are the big usages that you see for AI? Because I remember you mentioned at the very beginning, you're like, oh, this thing is great and smart, but I don't see any application for it. And then with ChatGPT 4.0, this probably changed. What are now the primary usages that you see? Is it trying to increase productivity? Is it trying to reduce staff and save costs? Is it trying to create new business models? Like, what is it that you see that your clients are currently interested about, especially given the type of economical environment that we're all in today?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting question. And it kind of boils down to what essentially is my mission ever since that week at my cabin, right? My mission became make Gen AI useful. And it really is kind of what gets me up every morning, because it's this incredible tool, but what makes it really useful? And there's small use cases and big use cases. And it's still very much being explored, both for me and my clients. But I've started finding some things that are like already now just winners. And maybe the biggest one is coding, where it really is a 10x thing for a person, even a seasoned expert. When they really learn to use this, they will basically become a 10x of whatever they were before. And that's incredibly powerful. So, and that's already now with current technology. And then if you add to that the fact that it's improving very quickly, then that's definitely a good starting point. Other use cases, ideation, I think, is an incredibly powerful use case. Whatever it is you're talking about, when you're identifying some ideas, just give it that list and say, generate more. And again, not to replace the humans, but to add to the, more ideas to the table, kind of, is super powerful. And if you combine those things, like let's say what would be a good design for a certain feature in my in my product. Well, now Claude, which is a competitor to ChatGPT, can generate that immediately, even on your phone. So I say, can you generate a clickable prototype of this kind of feature for this kind of product? and it'll generate it and run it in your phone, and it's already kind of there running like an app. So that's, first of all, it saves you the time of hours of doing Figma and discussions, right? This takes literally 30 seconds and you have one or more running prototypes. But then you can, because it's so fast, then the prototyping is essentially free. So then you can say, can you generate 10 more ideas? And please go wild and crazy, right? So now you get this incredible span of ideas. And even if you end up throwing all that code away, it's already paid for itself like times 10, essentially. So that's one. One that I've been using a lot myself with my colleagues and teammates, which I think is incredibly powerful, is using it like some kind of a superhuman secretary. So recording, like a typical thing is we're having an offsite. We have an idea for some, let's say a strategy for our company, right? Or some new product line. And we just talk about it and we record what we're saying. And then some just record the whole conversation. And sometimes one of us would interview everyone else individually about this question, just to get people's personal perspective without everyone else being in the room. So what ends up happening is we have this transcript of maybe 10 different conversations around this idea. And it's a mess, right? It's just a bunch of words. And then we just throw all that at Claude and say, make sense of it. And then out comes this beautiful, not only summary of what we did, but like it just boils it down to, here is the high level goal you're trying to solve. Here's what you talked about. Here are the commonalities between what you said. Here's some differences. And then we can ask it, what do you think? And it might add some of its own insights. And then we ask it to turn it into an action plan and identify risks. And it becomes like this amazing secretary sitting there listening to everyone. And then we ask her, so what do you think? And you put all this together, and she does it within like 1 minute. So that's a use case we use very often. And GPT-4o is good at this, but Claude is even better at it. It somehow reads your mind and gives you what you want. And now GPT has released a new model called O1, which seems to be even better at it. So it's like a what's it called, leapfrogging going on there.
Yeah, it's a ping pong game.
Yeah,
but I mean, that's fascinating. Now, do you see organizations working on a lot of? I mean, if you look at digital, right? 20 years, 25 years ago, this whole internet and digital, all of that started. And the first wave that I saw was, how do we bring in digital tools and stuff, right? Processes into our organization to save costs,
yeah,
right? Automate stuff. And then the next step that still a lot of organizations have not figured out is, how do we create value propositions for our customers?
Yeah.
So that, right, we can either scale better or deliver just better experiences and all of that.
Yeah.
Now, with AI, my assumption would be that it takes the same two steps.
Yeah, I've seen pretty much exactly that. It seems to be that we're naturally inclined to look at how we're already working today and use a tool like AI to just do what we're already doing, but kind of faster. That's our default. And I think it's a good starting point, because then you start getting your hands dirty. You need to start using the technology to start understanding what it can do. But then don't stop there, right? So once you've optimized the obvious things, like let's say you receive a lot of documents and you got to make sense of them. Well, add an automatic summary step for that, right? Mm-hmm. Or automatic routing, so the right request for proposal reaches the right department in your company. That's low-hanging fruit, can easily be done with AI, but it doesn't change the way you work. It just makes you do it faster. Sometimes a little more. Sometimes it can do it better, but initially it's just faster. But I think it's important to not stop there and then just say, okay, now we've taken what we do today and we do it faster. Now let's start questioning what we do today. What can we do differently? Like these 5 workflow steps, can we eliminate any of them at all? Can we merge some of them? Or are there new types of workflows that weren't even possible now before that we could do now? So that's kind of a natural follow-up. And I think it's similar, like you said, with digitalization.
Yeah. Now, I know it's difficult to make projections, especially in a time where things are happening this fast and everything is so uncertain. But given the amount of time you've spent now with AI, what are your projections? Right? Where will this take us? And let's not talk about the harmful stuff yet. I'll have an extra question around that. What kind of harm do you see in it? But if we look at an organization, a mid-sized one, a large one, or just a startup, how do you think AI will impact how we work, how we collaborate?
So there's a little bit of selection bias since I work with AI agents. So it's like I have this big fat hammer and I start seeing nails all over the place. but I really think agents are where things are going now. And it's not just me. I see a lot of reports about that, and autonomous agents in particular. And what that means from a kind of, normal person's perspective who's not an AI geek, it really means that having colleagues and having AI colleagues as part of your work. And it may sound kind of crazy, but I think people are going to very quickly just get used to it, like a normal thing, which we tend to do with new technology. I mean, just this thing, right? Magical device that lets you talk to anyone in the world, and at a blink of an eye, it's crazy, it's magic, it's science fiction, but we're all used to it now, right? So having just like a human colleague, having AI colleague that comes to work essentially, maybe it doesn't have a body, at least not initially, it's just digital, but connects to your daily stand-ups, takes on tasks from the board, right? It comes with suggestions, might argue against you sometimes, takes feedback, gives feedback. That's I think where it's going, and we're building a platform for that. There's a lot of other companies building platforms for that. Nobody has built a kind of what's it called, mature platform for that yet. It's still kind of the Wild West. So there's going to be a lot of accidents happening as these agents start doing their work. But I think I'll guess within a year it's going to be quite normal to have a AI colleague on your team, just doing whatever part of the work that you find they should be doing.
Yeah. Now, would that mean that we'll have less people on teams because the agents take over a bunch of the work that is currently happening?
So I guess there's two aspects to that. Yes and no, but yes in the sense that even now I find that one or two people with an AI, just as a developer, one or two people with an AI can easily outperform a full agile team of 7-8 people working full time. And I've been seeing that for a year and experiencing it firsthand. I mean, that's with current technology. So in that sense, yeah, you don't need as many people on a team to accomplish cool, complex things. But I'm kind of hoping companies are not going to use this as an excuse just to start firing people. Because if there's like psychological systemic issues with that. If we ignore the ethics around it for now and just look at the pure kind of systemic issues with it, that if you're like, oh, AI is so powerful, I'm going to fire half my people and AI empower the other half. Well, now they're going to be scared, and they're not going to be very positive to finding ways to become even more productive, because that just means another half of the people get fired. So what I hope companies will do is see this as an opportunity to just deliver more and better stuff, essentially.
Yeah, I look at it the same way. I think if an organization that it embraces AI and increases its productivity, then decides to let go half of their people, it just means that they lack imagination what they can do with those people.
Yeah. And from a kind of society perspective, I'm not too worried either, because like we make up jobs all the time, right? Most jobs that exist today did not exist 100 years ago. And if someone from 100 years ago would come and look today, they'd be like, what? YouTuber? Project manager? Scrum master? What are all these weird jobs you just make up? Like, they're not needed to produce food or to feed your, it's, so we just, whenever we invent new technology such as electricity or a steam engine or the printing press, lots of jobs disappear, and then we just make up new jobs that we think are really important, but maybe strictly speaking for survival aren't important at all. So I think we'll just keep making up jobs, but of course it'll be very disruptive for those people at the moment who just lose their job, of course. And this technology is moving so fast, so I think the disruption is going to be maybe bigger than previous technology shifts. But over time, I think we humans will have no problem finding stuff to do.
Now, what I found really interesting is you mentioned like a team of 2 or maybe 3 empowered by AI can easily outperform a team of 7 or 8 people.
Yes.
And I mean, in our team is a team of 3 people. You've met all 3 of them.
Yeah.
And I think that's really amazing, because I think they can, one aspect they can outperform AI is because they have the AI, and a regular team is because they have the AI doing a bunch of the work. The other reason is they have less coordination effort.
Yes, exactly. Lots of overhead goes away.
Exactly. That communication overhead, that goes away. Now, if you have a bunch of very small teams in your organization, because they are empowered by AI, I think for an organization, that's just amazing.
Yeah. However, you kind of increase another kind of overhead, which is synchronizing between teams. Because maybe you before had 2 teams and now you have 8. Yeah. And unless they're completely independent, if so, then congratulations. But if there's dependencies between them, you still got to coordinate. So I think that aspect we're still going to have to, be maybe more than in the past, be working with coordinating. Of course, AI can help with that, but I don't think it'll take it over.
No, AI can definitely help with that. And I mean, getting those teams to be independent, one of the most important aspects, and we both teach Scrum and all of that, is you need to have a team that is able to deliver end to end. So have all the capabilities inside. And usually that is the result why teams suddenly get bigger.
Exactly.
Right? Because people are not that T-shaped, to use that term.
We need someone who knows databases. We need someone who knows front-end coding. And
exactly.
Otherwise we can't do it, right?
Exactly. And with AI, I mean, one of our team members, Tom, you've met him, he joined us as a designer. Right? Now, as a designer, he was also doing a lot of work himself. He learned to do front-end development.
Yeah.
Then at some point, he's like, maybe I can do a bit of back-end stuff as well, like the small. With the help of AI, he became a full stack developer.
Yep.
Right?
Almost instantly, right?
and that's amazing, right? And I think in terms of learning, in terms of enabling people, and then ultimately empowering that whole team to deliver great stuff as a small unit, that has been the biggest catalyst that I've seen so far.
There is one thing that a message that I hope to get out to all developers around this, because there is a worry among many people, which is that, wait a sec, coding is fun. And now that's being taken away. And I'm just going to become some kind of a glorified project manager for the AI who gets to do all the fun stuff. I did a little experiment. Did a talk just a couple of days ago in Copenhagen at the GoTo conference. And I did a little experiment because in that was a room full of like 300 programmers. And I was showing live demos of coding with AI, what that looks like when you have this AI as your buddy. And after doing a few demos, I asked them, like, how many here like to code? Duh, every hand comes up, right? That's why we're kind of developers, like to code stuff. And I asked them, and I'd never tried this before, but I asked them, how many of you here would say that the thing I've been doing now for half an hour is coding? And basically every hand shot up. And that was really nice to see, because I did not actually write a single line of code myself. The whole point of my demo was to show how much you can do by just prompting. So I kind of exaggerated, let AI do exactly everything. So I had literally not touched the code myself. And yet everyone in the room felt that this is coding. And I told them that I feel like I'm coding. I'm having a lot of fun. And maybe it's not the coding that we love, the writing of the code. Maybe it's the creating, the making that we like to do.
The problem
and solving our problems. And guess what? We still get to do that, and we can do it even faster and better than before. So as a developer, I've been doing this for like 1.5 years now. I'm having a blast, right? I don't feel like anything's really been taken away. And that's kind of a message I kind of want to spread. Although I also want to kind of acknowledge that there's going to be some skills that you used to have as a developer that used to be very important, and that you've maybe built up some pride in. Like, I know exactly how to write a very good SQL query or something. And a lot of those skills are like not as important anymore. And that's going to be maybe a little bit of a grief process to go through that. Okay. But as a developer, that happens anyway. Like if you look at whatever work you did 10 years ago, technology has moved on. So maybe you were really good at writing XML 20 years ago, right? And now you're not writing XML anymore. That's not important anymore. So I think most developers pretty quickly can just get used to that. Things that used to be important to know aren't important to know, and they're replaced by new things that are important to know.
Yeah, no, I can absolutely relate to that. Now, taking that, right? So we're not taking away, or your projection is AI won't take away the fun that you have at your job, especially as a developer. What are the harms that you see?
So it's interesting. I like to compare this with kind of like the invention of fire or the invention of nuclear power. It's this incredibly powerful technology that also can cause a lot of harm, either through malicious use or just by negligence, right? Or just because it's new technology and we don't even know how it works. So like, oh, I accidentally burned down my house because, oh, fire can spread just like that? Wait a sec, So my like, I have some fears and some worries, very kind of concrete ones. One is about what happens in a world where anybody can deepfake anything super easily. Deepfake anyone's voice, deepfake any video. I'm a little bit worried about a whole generation of people growing up to be very cynical and just not trust anything. Like, is there a war in Ukraine or not? I don't know. I don't care, because it depends on where I looked, right? Who's president of the United States? I have no idea. Depends on who you ask, right? So I don't care because there's a video saying this and a video saying that. So that's a worry I have. But the optimistic side of me says that because that's such an obvious problem, there's a lot of smart engineers trying to counter it. So I think there's going to be AI is optimized for countering that by being basically constant fact checkers behind the scenes, helping you to identify what's fake, what's not. So it's a worry I have, but I also feel somewhat optimistic that we're going to be able to do something about it. In the midterm, I'm a little bit worried because I work with AI agents and I notice how extremely powerful they are. And when people like me play with these, some of them escape the lab. It's already happening in my simple system. Some of them escape the lab and do surprising things, mostly positive things, but sometimes negative things. And when we have 1,000 companies like mine playing around with fire, there's going to be some accidents. So I'm pretty certain there's going to be like Chernobyls, like the AI equivalent of Chernobyls, like major accidents with a lot of people dying for whatever reason, but hopefully not everyone dying, right? But big accidents with a lot of harm. And I just hope that just like with fire and TNT and nuclear power, hopefully we'll recover from them and learn from them and find ways to reduce the risk in the future. And also AI can help us with that part as well.
It can be part of the solution itself.
Yeah.
Or help.
So like when my kind of joking version of it is that there's going to be good AI and bad AI. AI itself isn't inherently good or bad, but the people behind it maybe. So there's the good AI and the bad AI fighting each other because we don't have a chance against AI. It's too fast, right? So the only chance to combat a bad AI is to make a good AI. So then all we can do is sit and eat popcorn and hope for the best, right? So that's kind of what I think it's going to be.
Oh man, I don't know if I'm now optimistic leaving this conversation or not. No, well, but I am.
Good AIs, right? That's what we can do.
Exactly. We can work towards making the best out of a technology.
Yeah.
The genie is out of the bottle anyway.
Yeah,
right?
and I mean, even
let's
now,
give
like,
it good direction.
This is so concrete because even now, just before this meeting, I was talking to my colleague, and we're like, okay, we're discussing how we can implement safeguards in our system to avoid agents going bananas, and that's what everyone needs to be doing. And I feel really happy about like there's a risk here, but I'm also helping to address it, and that's kind of nice. As opposed to risks that you can't do anything about, right?
Absolutely. So be a shaper and not a victim of whatever that
kind
that
of,
thing
yeah.
is.
Pitch in, man.
Pitch in, man. Henrik, being conscious of the time box that we set for ourselves, this is the end of our conversation. As always, it was wonderful seeing you and talking to you and learning from you.
Same.
I appreciate that so much. And yes, big thank you.
Awesome.